Chapter 4, Four-Part Chorale Style Voicing. In four-part chorale style voicing, we harmonize using four voices. These are singing voices. The soprano, alto, those are the two female voices, tenor and bass, and those are the male voices. Now these voices are in what we call normal ranges that you have to be really careful that when you write for these voices that you fit within those ranges. So you might want to try to figure out which is your range. This is a soprano range from about this note all the way up to this note. And this is an alto range from about that note all the way up to this note. And here's a tenor range from this low C in the bass clef all the way up maybe to that G. That would be the upper limit. And then the bass can go lower that note all the way up to middle C. Now, when we write for these voices, we write on a grand staff with the female voices, the soprano and the alto on the upper treble clef staff, and the male voices down below, the tenor and the bass, on the lower bass clef staff. And you can easily actually take an example of piano voicing that you did a couple of chapters ago that was in close spacing and transform it into chorale style writing. Now, here's an example. Take a melody here in the key of G, you can see, and a harmonization of Roman numerals has been provided by choosing chords that actually match those melodic pitches. Here are those harmonies realized using piano voicing in close spacing. Remember, that's where you place the notes of the chord underneath the melody, and you put three notes in the right hand and one note in the left hand, and the left hand is on the root tones. So you can see that example. So there's really only one that you've already written now in four parts. You can see every chord has four different notes. All you have to do is write it correctly so the singers can sing it. And to do that, you take that lowest voice in the G clef part and you transfer that down into the bass clef so that it's more clear that that line is actually intended for a tenor singer. And you can see that here in this example. They're the exact same notes, just written a little bit differently and distributed a little bit differently between those two clefs. Those letters S, A, T, B to the left of the staff refer to those voices: soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. And watch the way those stems are written. The soprano line is written with the stems going up to differentiate it from the alto that's got the stems going down. And same way with the tenor and the bass. Notice that the stems of the tenor are moving up and the stems of the bass are going down. Now, of course, when we did piano voicing, we put a brace on the left side of the grand staff to indicate that all the notes are played by one instrument. But in four-part chorale style writing, we put a bracket on the left. And that is an indication that there are actually different instruments, or in this case, different voices that are singing the parts. So, we're going to refine one of our definitions. You probably remember we talked about close spacing a few chapters ago. That's when the upper three voices are contained within an octave. The distance is an octave or less. But now that we have another definition of the different voices, we can say that close spacing is when the distance between the soprano and the tenor voice is less than an octave. You should go ahead and check your understanding 4.1. That's where you have to take a sort of a pre-done harmonization in piano style and transfer it into soprano, alto, tenor, and bass in four parts, with the stems going in the right direction, and also make sure that the tenor part is transferred down into the bass clef. Well, we've got a definition for close spacing. Now we're going to try another definition. This is called open spacing. And that's when the distance between the soprano and tenor is an octave or greater. So that's different from close, in which the distance from soprano and tenor is less than an octave. Now take a look at this closely spaced harmonization written in piano voicing. Let's see what it sounds like. And one of the problems here, you might see that lowest pitch in the right-hand part that you're supposed to transfer down to the tenor, by the time you get to that second chord, that pitch is too high. The tenor is not going to be able to sing that note. So this is one of the main reasons that we use open spacing, and that is to make sure that the pitches can be sung by the singers. Another reason why we use a different type of spacing is just that it sounds good, and it's a nice variety to use different kinds of spacing. So here's how you do it. Here's how you change a spacing into open spacing. You look at the first chord, the example, the one chord, and notice that the notes of the C triad, C, E, G, in the right hand are as close together as possible. To open them up, start by writing the melody pitch E, and then move down to the next closest harmony pitch C. But don't write this tone. Instead, skip it and go down and write the next closest harmony tone below it, which is the G. Continue in this manner by skipping the chord pitch E and then writing the pitch C. Notice that now you have written every note of the triad, but they are more spread out. And if we write this in four-part chorale style, it'll look like this example here. And notice that the distance between the soprano and the tenor is greater than an octave. By the way, another way to do this is what they call drop two. And what that means is you take not the highest voice, but the second to the highest voice. For that first chord, that second to highest voice is C. And what you do is you drop that pitch down an octave. And you do that for each chord, and you'll get the same result. You get an open voicing. So you can pick whichever method seems to work well for you. Here we're going to try this on the second chord of the example. You take that chord, which is the 4 chord, and we take the pitch F and we skip the C, and then we write the A, and then we skip the F, and then we write the C. And then we've got an open voicing now. And remember, the other way you could have thought of that is to do what we call drop two, and that is to take not the uppermost voice, but the second most upper voice, the C in this case, and drop that down an octave, and you'll have an open voicing. Here you can see it written in chorale style. If you rewrite the whole example in open voicing, it looks like this. And you should play the example because it sounds actually rather nice. Here it is. It really does create a pleasing effect, and it's quite distinct from close spacing. And for this reason, open spacing is used to create variety in the sonority of the music, and it's useful when the melody pitch is written so high that the close spacing would pull some of the other voices out of their natural range. And let's take note of a few important features of this example 4.9, because these are really guiding principles in all of your harmonization work. Number 1, the spacing definitions we've been talking about, open or close, only apply to the upper 3 voices. The bass voice is written to create a strong bass line. Right up to this point, we've been using just root tones in the bass part. And we don't consider that when we're trying to determine what type of spacing we're doing. So for now, anyway, this might change later, but for now, that lowest note, the bass, is just root tones. Number 2, the vertical distance between the soprano and the alto never exceed an octave in either open or close spacing. This is also true of the vertical distance between the alto and the tenor. Another way to say this is that when examining the upper 3 voices, the vertical distance between any 2 adjacent voices never exceeds an octave. But please notice that this is not true of the distance between the tenor and the bass. That vertical distance can have great variety, sometimes even as big as a 1/12. 3, the melody is found in the highest voice, the soprano, and the other tones are written beneath it. 4, all the chords are complete. And what I mean is they all contain a root, a third, and a fifth. We don't leave any note out. 5, now we're using triads, which are 3-note chords, but of course we have 4 singers. This is 4-part voicing style. So one of the pitches, of course, is going to have to appear twice. This is called the doubled pitch. So for all the chords we've written so far, which are in root position, this doubled pitch will always be between the bass pitch and some other voice. This is the root of the chord. In other words, you're doubling the root of the chord so far. 6. You'll find that if the harmony is changing to a new chord, the voice that is doubled with the bass is never the same twice in a row. For example, the first chord, the bass is doubled with a tenor. Bass and tenor have the same note. But in the second chord, the bass is doubled with a soprano. Try to verify that in that example. You can go ahead and check your understanding at 4.2, in which you're taking the piano voicing on one hand and converting it into 4-part chorale style, but in open spacing this time.